What's up, people? Hotep Jesus. We are back. As you already know, brilliant conversations with brilliant minds and brilliant people. Big brain shit all day, every day. Maybe not every day. But, I try to bring interesting conversations, things you might not hear about in everyday life. And today I got a brother with me, Nabeel. Me and him been following each other for a few years now. We're both fellow marketers, so we study the same science. We practice the same science, the science of marketing and advertising and copywriting. He calls himself the most expensive copywriter in Dubai, which is, I think, a brilliant title. He runs a company, Dropkick Copy. But without further ado, Nabeel Azeez is here. Nabeel, what's up, man? How you feeling?
Hey, thank you for having me. It's my pleasure, and I appreciate the invitation. Yeah, you're right, man. We've been following each other for a very long time, and I think it's because when I started becoming the Alpha Muslim, I was trying to shine a light because of being on Twitter. I was trying to shine a light on the Black Lives Matter issues that the Hotep community was bringing up. And through Uncle Hotep, I got to know like who you are and Dodoobs and Popson and like the whole crew. And I credit myself with actually introducing the Hotep community to like the Muslim discussion at large, especially in America. Because back before that, it was like you got to be down with BLM or like you're not even Muslim.
Yeah, really? The
Yeah,
Muslim
for
community
real.
was
Yeah,
siding with BLM?
yeah. It's like I mean, obviously there are pockets of Muslims who are like, yo, what is this Black Lives Matter stuff? It's like anybody who's been to the website and seen their like manifesto or whatever, it's like immediately obvious. Like, yo, this is we can't be like as Muslims, like we can't be down with this. However, I'm sure you're aware that quite a few Muslims in the West are allied with the left in general to sort of hedge against the attitude of the right towards Islamic Muslims.
Yeah, yeah. It definitely. You giving me flashbacks to when. Yeah, we were definitely trying to warn people about Black Lives Matter and provide an alternative to that narrative. Um, and yeah, I do remember. Yeah, we used to bang on them hard. I remember. Yeah, you definitely was around. Um, for people that don't know, what we noticed was on the website it said mothers, parents, children. It completely didn't even want to mention men. And then I put a video out on YouTube that said BLM is an LGBT agenda. And pretty much that's what it was. So, when we're looking at where we are today with the whole LGBT thing and how it's spreading across America, I always say you can thank Black Lives Matter for that because they were monumental in pushing that, especially in the Black community and making that a mainstream talking point. Especially when it was at a time when Black males were getting shot, straight Black males were getting shot, and then they turned it into an LGBT thing. I'm like, I don't know how y'all did that. So it's really good rules. But speaking of LGBT, um, the Muslim community, I believe, doesn't take too kindly to that demographic. I think I want to ask this question in two parts. Um, One, can you provide some clarity on the Islamic stance towards the LGBT community? And then can you touch on some of the violence that they face in some of the other countries and, how you feel about that as well?
Right. I mean, that's an excellent question. So first, to clarify, Islam has no problem with identities and personalities or how God, created you. What Islam does have a problem with is specific actions that are either permissible or impermissible. If we take the act of sex between two individuals, the only kind of sex that is permitted is between a husband and a wife, cisgendered, obviously, born male and born female. gotta clarify for the pronouns crowd. So the only kind of sex that is permissible is between a husband and a wife. All other forms of sexual intercourse are impermissible. So for us, homosexual sex is no different than fornication between a man and a woman outside of wedlock. Now, homosexuality or sodomy specifically is a little bit more severe because if you're familiar with the Bible, it's the same story in the Quran where Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed for practicing homosexuality. And the prophet Lot was sent to them to guide them away from these acts and towards Islam, because we believe all the prophets and messengers were Muslim. And then they refused his message and rejected it, and then God Almighty sent the angels to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. So obviously homosexual sex is a little bit more severe. I mean, for the most part, Islam, it's a little bit silly to identify yourself as in as a being with what you do in private with another individual in your bedroom. You're so much more than your sexual appetites as a human being, as a human soul. So we Muslims, well, the understanding Muslims at least, find it quite strange that the fact that you are gay or a homosexual or a lesbian is so ingrained in your identity that we just find it strange, because we don't actually deal with people in that way. People are so much more than that. Now, as far as violence goes, okay, we don't have the systems in place to actually be allowed to carry out such kind of violence. Most of that violence that happens against homosexuals is vigilante justice, and vigilante justice is not permissible in Islam. It's haram, actually. Now, you could point to the fact that Iran does something like hanging homosexuals off of cranes or something like that. But Iran is a little bit of a special case in the sense that they're Shia Muslims, and they're like, I guess, a different kind of version of Islam where it's almost a completely different religion.
So, all right, so let's just segue really fast and then come back to this. I don't know the difference between Shia, Shiite. What's is that what it is? Shia and Shiite?
Well, Shia is
or Sunni?
Yeah, there's Sunnis, yeah, Sunni Muslims and Shia Muslims.
You're Sunni.
I'm Sunni, and that's the majority of Muslims around the world. Shias are maybe like 15% of the Muslims around the world. Now, the difference is primarily theological. To the outside observer, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. For the most part, the beliefs are identical, except differ in a few key issues, where those key issues are, significant enough that there is some sort of, I guess, political discord and tension between the two communities.
So Shia is predominantly which countries?
Predominantly, it's in Iran. They are in Pakistan and Afghanistan as well. That whole sort of Persian region, that's where the majority of the Shias are. They're also in India. As far as outside of that area, the Eurasian kind of region, they're a tiny minority.
So the Shia and the Sunni dichotomy, is this a thing since inception of Islam, or this split happened later?
The split happened not since the inception. It was after the death of the Prophet Muhammad by about, I'm not sure the exact length of time, but after the third caliph of Islam was, after the progression of the third caliph of Islam. So the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, passed away, he died. Then there was one caliph after him, then the next caliph, and from the third caliph is when the problems started to happen. The split is because the Shias, or the original Shias back in the day, they said that a particular companion of the Prophet should be the caliph, and the rest of the community said, no, it should be this guy. And that's where the I guess the split happened. It's you could call it political, but where that initial political rift started, where it ended up, is a much more different place. So when it began, it was something that was purely political, in the sense that, okay, we want our guy, and you guys want your guy. But now the split is so much that we have almost completely different theologies, in the sense that, if you dig into the theological beliefs of Sunni Muslims and Shia Muslims, you'll find almost nothing in common. It could be almost two different religions in the way that they practice their religion.
Mm, mm. Okay, so I just want to touch back on something you said earlier. You said that it's kind of odd that people identify themselves based upon their sexual activity. And I agree. That was my thing. I'm like, there's no special place for guys who like fat asses or big titties, right? Do I get special treatment? Do I get my own bathroom because I like big titties? You know what I'm saying? Um,
The titty pride parades.
Yeah. So do you think, is there some sort of agenda to like degrade society, or to bring people, I guess, to their lower selves, their lower nature?
I think that's an excellent point, in the sense that once you degrade people to the point that their only concerns in life are fulfilling their carnal desires, and that's not just sex, that's your appetites, in the broad plural sense of the word, I think they become easier to control. So you flood them with unlimited entertainment, unlimited food, unlimited food in the sense that the kind of food that we have, not just unlimited broccoli, it's like unlimited highly processed satiating food, and you flood them with unlimited sex, in the sense of sexual imagery and access to pornography, and the media is talking about sexuality and sex in the music, it's in the TV, it's in the cinema. You flood them to the point where the only concerns on their mind are these base desires, and I think they're easier to control. What do you think about that?
No, I think you hit on all points on that. Yeah, I'm a spiritual person, so I always look at everybody on earth as a soul before the physical body. So if you don't look at yourself as that first, I think you'll be led astray in this life existence. And I think that the human species has done so much as far as technology is concerned, as far as knowledge and spreading knowledge is concerned, building, we have so many capabilities, and it's like we're stuck on sex, right? And it's just like sex is just something that we do to make sure that the species lives on, right? And outside of that, it just becomes something for pleasure. So, when we're dealing with pleasure, if you do it in an unsacred manner, it's no different than doing drugs, right? Because people start getting addicted. So I think that's when you start having a degradation of society, when everybody's worried about sex. For example, how do you feel about the porn conversation right now that Andrew Tober and Gab brought to the forefront of the national conversation, where people are talking about porn on social media being free. Meanwhile, like if I misgender somebody, that can get me banned from the platform, right? So how do you feel about that porn conversation? Because personally, yesterday I said, "Yo, ban porn," right? And I'm gonna discuss what I mean by that probably in a lengthy blog post after this. But how do you feel about that conversation?
Yeah, it's funny, right? So if I tweet at that trans activist from Canada, and I start calling her by her male born name, yeah, I'm going to get suspended or banned from Twitter. Meanwhile, if you want to find porn on Twitter, it's freely available, and sometimes it'll come across your TL. It's usually for some reason it's usually Black Twitter that's retweeting porn. Yeah, I had to unfollow some people. It's like, yo, guys, bro, what? So yeah, so it's freely available on Twitter. Now, okay, as far as the porn debate goes, in Islam, we have an idea of individual rights, and we also have something called the common weal. So the rights of society. If and in general, the two are meant to have some sort of coexistence with each other, where one doesn't infringe too much on the other. In situations where the common weal is threatened to a great extent, then the state is required to intervene, because what's required is the preservation of society as a whole. I think it's the great lie of the Occident, of the West, that the individual is the fundamental unit of society. The fundamental unit of society is the family, and the preservation of the family is one of the core objectives of Islamic law, of the Sharia. So when we're talking about porn, it's, first of all, it's not permissible. It's haram, unequivocally. Creating it is worse than watching it, obviously, because creating it, you're doing actual fornication and adultery, whereas in watching it, you're committing a lesser form of adultery. So it's unequivocally haram. It's not permissible, and in most cases, if you go to any Muslim country, pornographic websites are blocked. Yeah, there's ways around it. Okay, obviously there's ways around it. People can find ways. Like if somebody wants to watch porn, they're going to watch porn. Yeah. However, it's not about the fact that people can do it. It's about limiting the access as much as possible where it's possible. It's like drunk driving is illegal, right? But people still drive drunk and get arrested for driving drunk or whatever. You're trying to protect society as much as possible, and wherever possible, sin shouldn't be out in the open. Sin is something that, as much as possible, we're humans, we're weak, we're going to sin. We should try to keep that in private, so that God Almighty can conceal those sins for us. It's actually a mercy from God that He conceals your sins from the public. And in fact, open public sinfulness is one of the causes of God's wrath.
My bad. I'm just trying to do some promo here. So if I waved a magic wand and I say, yo, Nabeel, I'm God. I said, Nabeel, you are a dictator of said state, let's say the United States. How do you propose you would deal with the distribution or the violation of a law, or I guess maybe it's a law? Would you say you would use the state to limit the pornography? What's the penalty? How would you tackle this thing?
Is it a secular state or a Sharia state?
Let's do both, right? Because when you say Sharia, I don't know what that means, right? Let's say it's secular. Let's go secular first, and then we'll go Sharia.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I can sort of see it from different angles, because I don't want the government getting involved in what people do in their own private homes or in their own privacy, right? However, a problem could get so bad in society that a government has to step in, right? I mean, if you look at just American society in general, there are laws against selling tobacco to minors. There are laws against selling alcohol to minors. There are all these laws designed that infringe on people's individual liberties to protect the good of the society. So I don't see why porn couldn't fit in that framework. On the other side, I remember on Twitter, I think it was Stephanie Hazen that asked, what are the negatives of banning porn? And I was thinking, like, okay, if they did ban porn successfully and there was like zero porn happening, these hoes would have to go get a job. and that's going to drive wages down. Yeah. And okay, now there's going to be fewer jobs and people making less money. So ultimately, it's the corporations that win. Okay. And on top of that, these hoes that act in pornographic films, they would start whoring for real. Okay. And that could lead to human trafficking. That could lead to more violence against women. That could lead to more drugs, crime, criminality. So there's a number of different effects. And I remember also seeing on Twitter somebody said that porn, it keeps the incels pacified. So there's going to be, like, if there was zero porn, there might be more mass shootings. So I mean, it is there's a lot of considerations to be had, but in general, I think porn is a societal evil that has been pushed by certain individuals. I mean, not individuals, a certain group of people, which I don't think it's permissible to mention. It's haram to mention on YouTube, or your channel will get banned. Yeah, so we can't mention those people. But in general, it's a societal evil that society would be better off if it didn't exist. On a Sharia state, in fact, I mean, it's even more complicated in a Sharia state. Why?
Well, hold
Because
on. Before we do that, tell me
go
what
ahead, man.
Sharia means.
Okay, what is Sharia? Sharia etymologically means a path to water where you lead your animals to drink. Okay? And in the religious sense, it's the path that God has laid out for his creation to paradise. And it's legal consideration, it's law, it's spirituality, it's creed, it's all of those things. And when people say Sharia in common parlance, what they're referring to is the law. Okay? And it's the legal system by which an Islamic state will operate. So if we were in an Islamic state where Sharia was the law of the land, as opposed to the Constitution of the United States, I think it would be even more complicated. One, because at its heart, Sharia requires the consent of the governed. It's almost impossible to enforce the laws of the Sharia unless people are actually willing to go by its precepts. If you look at the history of the Muslims, the early Muslims, when Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was sent with the message, the first maybe 10 to 13 years of his prophethood was fully spent purifying the hearts of the people and teaching them their religion, spirituality, and their creed. Only after which did these legalistic rulings come down. The banning of alcohol. Had God Almighty banned alcohol from day one, the people wouldn't have stopped drinking alcohol. However, because they took the time to purify their hearts and get closer to God, when the ruling came down to stop drinking alcohol, they did it willingly. There was no enforcement required. So in a Sharia state, and let's say it was like you waved the magic wand and overnight, like Nebraska became a Sharia state. Yeah. These people have no concept of Islam, of submission to their creator, of following the rulings of Islam, of these acts of worship. Now, if I were to impose the rulings of the Sharia, naturally the people are going to reject it. Yeah. So that's what I say. That's why I say it's a little bit more complicated in a Sharia state. I can't just show up and one day ban pornography. What you would have to do is do something more grassroots, where the preachers would go out and the scholars would go out and the imams would go out and bring the people closer to God mercifully until they reach the point where their hearts are free of the vice of pornography, as opposed to legalistically trying to tear them away from something that's addicting them.
I love that answer because that's exactly what I meant when I said ban porn, you know, and so many people with their small brains immediately ran to the ideology of government and said, "Oh, you know, when they see two words, ban porn, they immediately think I mean legislation." It's not what I mean at all. There's several ways to carry about change in the world. One of them is by force, and other ones by coercion. And what I believe is the proper way to ban porn is through coercion. You first ban it in yourself, then you ban
Yeah.
it in your household, then you ban it from your friends and your network, and you make it a cultural thing to where when somebody shares porn, it's looked down upon. So it's banned socially. And that's what I mean when I say ban porn. Ban it socially. And then, like you said, have your scholars and your religious people go out and relieve people of this sin. And then you can make it law, right? Like, here's what we believe, right? Here's what we believe is the right and wrong thing to do. So I'm glad you said that because it makes so much sense. A lot of people think when they say Sharia law, uh, you know, like Ilhan Omar, they believe that people like Ilhan Omar is going to come to their state and install Sharia law, or in their city install Sharia law. Things are going to change overnight. Is that true? Can that happen?
I mean, just practically, it's impossible. Um, like I mentioned earlier, to have Sharia law requires the consent of the governed. Okay, and to administer Sharia law, you need a single ruler. That ruler also has to have the consent of the governed. Okay, so practically speaking, the way America is, and your legal system, your checks and balances, your forms of government, it's impossible for it to happen. What could happen is Muslim communities in the US become they might take over an area, and they choose internally as a community that this is how we're going to operate ourselves. And I think the Orthodox Jewish people do that in America. Isn't that correct?
Oh, that's
Yeah,
correct.
they govern themselves. And in England, the Orthodox Jews have their own separate court system, like a Sharia legal system.
They have it like that in
True.
Brooklyn, New York, too.
Exactly. They have their own legal system. They have Sharia courts, Jewish Sharia courts.
They got their
So,
own police. They have their own courts. They have their own schools. They got their own buses, their own ambulances. Yeah. Self-governing.
yeah, yeah. And I don't think you're allowed to step to them that way, right? Where you like, yo, you guys can. This is America, Jews. You can't do that over here. Yeah, I don't think you're allowed to do that, right?
Oh, no. Oh, you don't want to do that. You don't want
Okay.
to do that. That's a bad move.
Yeah. So okay. So practically speaking, like if the Jews can have it and you're okay with the Jews having it, like what's the difference with the Muslims having it? In fact, there are already places in America right now that are majority Muslim, and you can't tell the difference between uh, Palestine. Like there's a place in New Jersey called Little Palestine. You're from New Jersey, right?
Yep.
Yeah, Little Palestine in New Jersey, Dearborn, Michigan, Philadelphia, Germantown. Okay, like that beard that Black Thought walks around with. That's called the Sunnah beard. What is Sunnah? Sunnah means the tradition of Islam. Okay, and you have non-Muslim African Americans be walking around with the jalabia, the white, the robes. Yeah. So there are places in America already where the community self-governs and acts in a certain way. It's not law. It's not written into law, but there is a I guess you could call them the social norms are very, very Muslim, and people conduct themselves in that way. In the sense that, let's say you and I have some sort of business dispute, right? Instead of going to the court, we might decide, let's go take it to the Imam, and the Imam might, squash the beef between us, and that's us consensually, between us, mutual consent. We agree that we're going to go and stick to God's law instead of the law of the non-Muslim.
Oh yeah. Sidebar, what's up with the beard? What's the significance behind the beard?
The Prophet Muhammad said, grow your beards and trim your mustaches. So Muslim men do it because the Prophet Muhammad said so.
Okay, got you. It just happened to be in the book. Cool. So let's get back to it a little bit. I think the problem is there's some subconscious racism from whites and Europeans, right? And then there's also when we're talking about why the Orthodox Jews can get away with it, but the Muslims can't, right? So I think it's twofold. I think it's the power of the Israeli state. And then I also think it's the fact that the Jewish people look white, right? They look like white people. So they look at them as if, you know, that's their cousin. But the Islam community is coming over with brown skin, right? So I think there's some racism, some subconscious racism or conscious racism at play here, which is why it's okay for one group to do it, but not another, right? And then we can add in all the other media effects to the psyche of the American and what they believe about Islam, so on and so forth. But there is a very real threat to Europe with immigration. In America, we're dealing with immigration from several different countries, including Mexico, and it's degrading our society. And the Europeans feel as though the Islamic community, refugees are coming into Europe and displacing them, replacing them. What are your thoughts on that topic?
Well, I mean, I agree with the Europeans. There was this YouTube video. It was a presentation by this college kid named Jason something or other, where he gave a presentation for his like college class that went sort of viral. I don't know if you saw it, where he was talking about replacement migration, yeah, as a UN policy to combat declining birth rates in the West, yeah. So they're bringing in all of these migrants to fill the worker roles that are going to be freed up because a generation, 2 generations down the line, the white folks aren't having enough kids. I don't like this, actually. And I sort of lost my train of thought. But what I wanted to say was...
Well, you started off saying that you agree that...
Yeah, I do. I do agree with the Europeans in the sense that, one, just speaking from an Islamic perspective, okay, a Muslim moving from a Muslim land to a non-Muslim land is something that is disliked in the religion, if not not permissible. The only reason why a Muslim is allowed to live in a non-Muslim land is if he has some business there, or if he's there to call people to Islam. Okay, so that's one thing. Second thing is, all of these able-bodied men, or whoever it is, these migrants, these economic migrants, I do believe they call them, are leaving the Muslim countries, and there's a brain drain happening. So who's going to take care of the Muslim countries? Okay. The third point is, there is always an equilibrium that exists between a low birth rate and a high birth rate. Okay. And instead of thinking short term, like, okay, what's going to happen a generation from now when all of these, our white people are not having enough kids and we don't have enough people to fill the jobs? They ought to be thinking 200, 300, 500 years from now, where it's all going to balance out. Yeah. So I really don't see the positive benefit of bringing all these migrants, when what happens is mostly it's leading to civil strife. And you can see the difference between countries like Sweden and countries like Poland and Hungary. Like, it's just blatantly obvious. Like, you don't need to be like a genius to figure that out. Mm-hmm. So I sympathize with the I guess the right wing, if you would call it, in terms of their demographic displacement. However, having said that, most of these people are just LARPing online on Twitter and YouTube. Like, they should be getting married and having kids. It's not our fault that you're not getting married and having kids. You know what I'm saying?
So I think it's safe to say that the white man's religion has failed them, because if the white man had followed their religion as the Muslims do, they might not be dealing with some of these issues. Am I correct in thinking that?
This is absolutely correct. And the failure of these Western revivalist movements, which most of the right-wing groups are, whether they're interested in bringing back classical liberalism, or if they're interested in bringing back Christianity. I don't know if you've read the book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. It's a business book, but it applies to an intellectual and cultural tradition as well. Your cultural tradition of individualism, of secularism, is what got you here. Secularism is not going to solve the problems that it created. You have to find a different way of thinking, which, if they all become Muslim, all the problems would go away.
They're not gonna want to hear that, but it's, you know, there's a meme going around where it says Islam was right about women.
It's true. Islam is right about everything, especially women.
Okay, why do you think Islam was right about women?
Well, first of all, because Islam is from God Almighty, and God Almighty is the one who created us. And as our creator, he knows intimately what is best for us to achieve success and happiness in our temporal existence. Moreover, by living our temporal existence in a specific way, allows us to achieve the eternal happiness in the hereafter, because we're just here for a little bit of time until the real life starts. And if you look at the nature of what's happening to women in Western societies and their condition, if you will, despite having every freedom possible, there's this something called the happiness paradox, where the more freedoms you give the women, the less happy they become. In fact, they're miserable right now. Islam understands that women are, or should be, led by men. And that is the situation where they're happiest. That is the situation where they're able to flourish as women. That is the situation where they're able to do the best for themselves, in the sense that the way God has created them. Okay, what is the function of a woman, or in the optimal condition of a woman? It's something that men cannot do. It's creating life and raising families and nurturing the next generation of society and building empires through the act of motherhood. So the rules that exist in Islam for women are for their own benefit. I just saw a tweet today where somebody was talking about how all of his women friends were complaining that when they went traveling alone as a tourist to all of these different countries, that they would get sexually assaulted. And when they would go to the cops would say, you need to wear more clothes and you should have a male companion with you. In Islam, it's impermissible for a woman to travel alone without a male guardian, especially on long distances. It's for her safety. It's not because we're trying to oppress you, we're trying to protect you. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
As far as the male guardian being in charge of the woman, let's say, talk about marriage, for example, okay? The woman has to get the approval of her father. Why? Because, first of all, number one, dating is prohibited in Islam. So a good Muslim woman is not going to have any experience with men before she gets married. If she has no experience with men, on what basis does she have, or what criteria is she able to judge whether a man is good for her? What is required is another man who is wise to the ways of the world, who understands men, who has life experience, to say, yes, daughter, this man is a good match for you. No, daughter, this man is not a good match for you. Okay, so that's why she needs her male guardian's permission. And it's not just a one-way thing, right? If that male guardian abuses his authority, let's say my daughter is getting married and there's a suitor for her, and he's got a good job, he's a practicing Muslim, he's got great character, but I just don't like his face, and I say, no, you can't marry him. Okay, I'm being unreasonable. Okay, and my daughter tries to convince me, whatever, I don't budge. She has a right to go to the judge and say, listen, this guy wants to marry me. He's an all right guy. I don't see anything wrong with him, and I don't think my dad sees anything wrong with him, but he's just not letting us get married. The judge has the right to now make a decision that, okay, you're abusing your authority here. Either you let them get married, or I nullify your guardianship and I become her guardian. Okay? So all of these rules for women exist for their protection, in order to keep them safe, in order to allow them to flourish as women.
Interesting. All right, so correct me if I'm wrong, but does the Islamic faith and or the Quran condone beating your wife? Domestic violence, as we would call it here in America.
Yeah. So with regard to the legal rulings in Islam, there are a number of overarching axioms that apply across the board. One of those axioms is there is no harming and no reciprocating harm. Okay? With that said, there are going to be situations where a husband and wife disagree. Islam provides a way to mediate those disagreements in escalating ways, which culminates with the husband being authorized to give the wife a light smacking with something like a wooden toothbrush or a balled up scarf. He's not allowed to physically harm her. It's like okay, I take a pen, I take this pen and I start smacking her like this and saying, hey, listen, if you don't start acting right, there's going to be problems. Okay, so it's not to harm her, and it's not meant to cause her physical harm. However, having said that, there are 3 different stages that you got to go to before you even get to that stage. So the first stage is you got to have a conversation with her. You listen, why are you doing this? This is not right. This is not how you're supposed to behave as my wife. Okay, that's the stage number 1. Second stage is you ignore her. You don't sleep in the same bed with her. Okay, you withdraw your attention. And any man who understands the women knows that withdrawing your attention is like torture to a woman.
Oh yeah, that's in my book.
Yeah. The third stage is arbitration between the families. So she brings one of her family members, you bring one of your family, and there's some sort of arbitration that happens. And the very final stage is this. I mean, if you've gone through all those 3 stages and you still have to do this, like, bro, why is she your wife? You should have been divorced her, long time ago. You know what I'm saying? So people tend to misunderstand that, and they have a very superficial, it's a very sensationalistic reading of Islamic teachings. The primary message that I want to convey is that there is no harming another Muslim or reciprocating harm.
So the videos I see online where they say women step out of line, and I see the dudes beating the shit out of her, like smacking her upside the head. What is that? Like, is this violation of Islamic law? This is the Shiites. What is that?
No, I mean, obviously that's a violation. That's not allowed in Islam. First of all, like, let's say for example, in Islam, hitting somebody in the face is haram. I'm not allowed to hit anybody in the face. So a husband, just ipso facto, a husband slapping his wife upside the head, not allowed in Islam. Okay. funnily enough, I suppose it's not really funny, but in some cases it could be funny. If you go to countries like Algeria, the women there think that if a husband doesn't smack her around from time to time, he doesn't love her. The women will say that. There's like a clip that went around where like they're interviewed on TV on like the news, and the interviewer is asking them, "Yo, what do you think about a husband, smacking his wife around?" And the women are like, "That means he loves me." You know what I'm
Wow.
saying? So I think some of these Algerian women must be like red pill, really red pill, because it's like, yo, you know how women are, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
like listen, we know how we are. From time to time that we might need a smack around once in a while.
Yeah.
Um, and, and also just looking at it from a practical perspective, I'm sure you've seen all the videos on YouTube where women have lost all sense of their physical stature in comparison to a man. Yeah. And they will act out or act the fool with impunity simply because they don't believe that any sort of physical reprisal is on the way. And they may push the man to such an extent where he loses control, or he may be justified in defending himself, and then she gets, attacked, or in this case, it could be self-defense, right? So I think, on balance, people ought to. It's just there to protect both sides of the party.
Right. All right. Let's talk about the. My dad jokes around. He calls them bed sheets, right? And I think they call them burkas, and they wrap the women, right? Is this a new thing? Because I know in Iran it wasn't always like that. I think in the 70s they decided to do the whole wrapping of the woman thing. When did this start? Has it always been this way? And then how do you feel about it? Like, is that how women should look or dress, or what are your thoughts on that?
All right. So Islam stipulates some specific guidelines about the way a woman should dress. Okay. She is only allowed to expose her face and her hands. Everything else is supposed to be covered. Okay.
Woo! Face and hands.
Yeah, that's the maximum that could be shown. Okay. What clothing she wears to achieve this condition depends from culture to culture. If you go and see Muslim women in Nigeria, in West Africa, in Mauritania, their style of hijab is very, very different than Saudi Arabian women or Malaysian women. It's because their culture dictates the style of clothing that they wear. The idea of Muslim women in America walking around decked out all black, face covered, with the gloves on sometimes, that is something really quite new because of the spread of what's called Salafi Islam, or the Saudi style version of Islam. In the 80s and the 90s, Salafi style Islam had the lock on the marketing, on the digital marketing, or in the marketing in general. Okay, they were the ones who were spreading as much as possible, not just on the digital marketing side, but in the pamphlet side, in the brochure side, in the the materials, the marketing
They were
materials.
wholly in charge of spreading the propaganda.
Exactly. So those understandings of Islam spread, where to the extent where the kind of Islam that is practiced is more from the external perspective, in the sense of how we dress, how we talk, how we behave, is more a imitation of Saudi Arabian culture than it is the basic fundamentals of Islam. Yes, it's Islamic, but it's the Saudi version, or the Saudi culture, that has been imported into America, which doesn't make sense, because a Muslim should adapt to the culture that they're in as much as possible without committing anything that is impermissible in the religion.
Hmm. I just wanted to do a quick analysis really fast here. It says 1 Corinthians 11:6. Um, if a woman does not cover her head, she might as well have her hair cut off. But if it is a disgrace for a woman to have her hair cut off and her head shaved, then she should cover her head. So, a lot of people, say, certain things about Islam and, the wrapping of the women. And again, the white man has lost sight of his religion. He's not following his religion to a T, because if he was following his religion to a T, his women wouldn't be walking around the way they do in Western civilization. I always looked at the wrapping of the women in the Islamic culture as a protection from the perversion that's purported by Western Civ. I'm glad you gave me that breakdown, because now I understand that when I see the whole all black thing, that's wholly a Saudi creation. Whereas if I see Ilhan Omar, she's just got the turban on. She's just following the guidelines of Islam based upon her interpretation and culture.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
And
great.
That's not to say that the Saudi version is incorrect.
Right.
It's just that black clothing is the lightest weight clothing that is available, and they're in the desert. It's hot,
Yeah.
so that kind of clothing is what's most comfortable to wear over their outer garments. It's the same reason why the the Arabian men especially in the Arabian Gulf, they wear white.
Right.
Yeah, because it reflects the sunlight, and it's lighter, and it's more airy, and all those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's wholly an interpretation. This is how the Saudis decided to interpret the Islamic Bible, and based upon their geographic location, this is how they choose to dress, right? So every
Yep.
region, including America, we wear jeans, right? In some places they don't wear jeans. So it's definitely a cultural aspect, but the commonality is the fact that a woman shouldn't be showing her hair and only her face and hands should be shown, right?
Yes.
Right.
And if you look at any representation of Mary, Mother of Christ, her hair is never exposed.
Right. Right.
Nuns, their hair is never exposed.
Right. I was
Uh,
raised Catholic. I know.
Women 100 years ago would never go out with their hair exposed.
Right. Right.
So it's something that's common throughout history, throughout cultures. And the idea of covering your head is normal. It's like an act of propriety almost. It's like good manners. It's like how back in the day in the 50s, like every man would go out with a hat on, right? It's just how culture has changed, and it's just to determine that the more exposed you are, the more forward thinking or progressive you are, which is really just not the case.
Yeah. Orthodox Jews, the women actually don't leave the house unless they have wigs on, or their hair is covered. So they also practice that
You
hard
know what?
body.
There's some super hardcore Orthodox Jews that actually wear the niqab. They wear the burqa. You can't see
Okay.
their face.
Oh wow. So here's something that's odd to me, and maybe you can correct me. To me, it's haram. I see Islamic women wearing the full what's the dress, that Saudi dress that from top to bottom, what's that called?
That's called the abaya. The robe is called the abaya. The head covering from top to bottom is called the burqa. The face covering, just the face covering, is called niqab. So you can call it a lot of different things.
All right, so the ayah, is it called?
Abaya, the robes, the long robes.
Abaya.
Yeah,
Okay, so
abaya.
we got the abaya. The women on Instagram are wearing the abaya and the burqa, right? And they're posing in provocative poses,
Yeah.
and they're wearing makeup. To me, I'm like, yo, this kind of defeats the purpose of your whole religion. You like supposed to be humble and all this. What does Nabeel say about all this? Is this haram? Are they still playing within the rules of Islam? Are they rebelling? What's happening there? Because I don't like it.
I mean, your Muslims got thoughts too, man.
They got what?
Muslims got thoughts too, THOT. Uh, but
Okay, so
okay,
you could be a
so
thought
yeah,
in
just
the
to,
burqa.
I mean, just to answer your question, in a serious way, okay? Uh, People will dress like a Muslim. They might look like a Muslim, but they're doing it because of certain pressures in their society.
Right.
They dress that way because that's just the way people dress in their society. And
Mm-hmm.
in Arab culture specifically, it's like shameful to stand out from the crowd. It's very collectivistic, right? So they may wear this clothing because they're trying to be obedient to their family, or they're forced to do it, or it's just the way their culture is. But they'll take as many liberties as they can to express themselves, express their personality within those limits. Now, me personally, I think makeup defeats the entire purpose of hijab. The purpose of hijab is modesty. The purpose of hijab is so that when you go out, you are not attracting attention to yourself, which is like the opposite of the way women are in general. Like they want attention. So maybe like if you philosophize about it, you could say that hijab exists to protect women from their instincts to always be seeking attention, because not all attention is positive. In fact, most attention towards women from men is negative.
Oh yeah.
You know, so in order to protect them from that negative attention, so that they can go out when they have to go out and go about their business unharmed and unmolested, uh, they are supposed to go out in plain clothing. So makeup defeats the purpose of the hijab, and so does a lot of this hijab fashion. Like if you go on YouTube, there's a lot of fashion tutorials for hijab wearing women. Defeats the purpose of hijab. Now, some may say my interpretation is a little bit strict, in the sense that as long as we're fully covered, there may be some leeway, depending on culture, for women to express their own individuality. And I fully take that argument. But for the most part, a lot of women, they're taking it too far.
Mm.
And
Mm.
and hijab, if you think about it, hijab is not just what you're wearing. Okay, there are women I know who don't actually cover their hair, but they're actually very modest in the way they conduct themselves. They don't chit chat with men. They don't, they don't talk to other men when they're out. The clothing that they wear is very very loose. It's they don't go out wearing too much makeup. So in some cases there are Muslim women who don't cover their hair or their face, who behave with the spirit of hijab. Then there are some women who are actually wearing the covering, but they're uh, behaving like whores.
Yeah, I think Islam does such a great job with the women. I remember I was going to get a falafel, and outside the place was a table of all the women, and I was just being cordial and, hey, ladies, how y'all doing? And they all lifted their head up and looked at me like I was crazy for speaking to them, right? And none of them said nothing back. And I was with the homie at the time, and I'm like, damn, y'all can't say hi back like that. And then they still continue to ignore me. So I said to my homeboy, I said, you see how well they got their women trained? Like that's how it's supposed to be. Like you're not supposed to be out here talking to strange men, right? So
Yep.
I really admire that about your culture. Um,
Thank you.
yeah, if had it been, that's another thing I see with black women and white women. You see them getting into all these arguments and fights with men. And I'm like, even for men, I feel it's a violation to be in a debate with a woman. I don't debate women. I don't argue with women. It's just no point, right? Like, tell your husband come here, tell your father come here. Let me argue with them. I'm not arguing with a woman. And I feel like it's beneath a woman to argue with a man. I believe she has much more important things. She should hold herself to a higher standard than to be, I look at men as kind of like dogs. And you should have hold a higher esteem for yourself than to be arguing with the dog. You should have, your priority should be higher than arguing with somebody you don't even know. The only person you should be arguing with is your husband. So I really admire that, and I find that Western Civ women want to be at odds with men, as you see with the feminist movement, so on and so forth. But I want to ask you this, something that's a sensitive subject, not only to the African population, but even the European population as they witness this: female genital mutilation. And then I had a talk with Brendan Murata last night, the director for the Netflix documentary Circumcision in America, American Circumcision. Where does Islam sit with genital mutilation for both men and women?
Okay, so let's talk about the male circumcision first. Okay, so male circumcision, there's no really any difference of opinion about this. It is a tradition that is carried out first by Abraham. He was the first person to circumcise himself, and he did it when he was 80 years old. So we follow that tradition. It's most practical to circumcise the child just after he's born, so that he doesn't have to go through any complications of going through a circumcision when he's older. A lot of cultures do the male circumcision when the boy is 7. So when he reaches the age of intellectual discernment, right? Because before the age of 7, they don't really know what's going on. But once they reach that age of 7, like, their intellect starts to kick in.
They're self-aware.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the age, they call it the age of discernment, which self-aware is the perfect translation. So sometimes they do it at that age. Okay, so that's there's no issue. There's no issue there, and I don't think there is an issue there with regard to male circumcision. I know there's a lot of debate around it in the West now, because it's viewed as some sort of mutilation or torture of a child. However, for most of Western history, men have been circumcised according to the Christian and Jewish traditions as well. For the women, okay, when we talk about female genital mutilation, there are two kinds of procedures. One of them is called a clitoridectomy. Okay, clitoridectomy. And the other one is called a clitoridotomy. Okay, a clitoridectomy is a clitoral excision, where you basically, it's almost like a female castration, where you cut out much of the clitoris, the labia, and a lot of the sensitive areas of the vagina where most of the nerve endings are, and then it's stitched up with a small opening to allow for urine to pass through and sexual intercourse to take place. Okay, clitoral excision. This is unequivocally impermissible in Islam. The fact that some Muslim cultures do it is besides the point. They shouldn't be doing it. Okay, all right. So clitoridectomy, clitoral excision, haram. Okay, clitoridotomy is what's called a hoodectomy. All right, or in some cases, some might call it a labiaplasty. The two different things. A hoodectomy is a cosmetic procedure where the hood of the clitoris, some of the hood of the clitoris, is removed to expose the clitoris. Okay, this gives the woman more sexual pleasure during the act of intercourse. All right. So the clitoridotomy is something that is allowed. It's not obligatory. It's allowed in Islam. So the hoodectomy. Some Muslim cultures practice this, where the top of the clitoral hood is slightly removed, so that when she becomes a woman, when she gets married, she's able to have a better sexual experience with her husband. Okay, so that is what clarifies the difference between the incorrect and impermissible act of female genital mutilation, which is the clitoral excision, and the female circumcision, which is the hoodectomy. And
Right.
people confuse the two, which is why all of this outrage happens.
Awesome. So now, thank you for clarifying that. For people that want to know, as you can see, haram for female genital mutilation. For anybody to know, haram means forbidden. We got some super chats here. Rique Caballero, $2 super chat, and Black Mountain Hotep has a $5 super chat, and their super chats are quite similar. It says, "How has Islam treated and treats Black people?" And then Black Mountain Hotep says, "What, in your opinion, explains the nature of Africanized Islam? If you are of the belief that there is an Africanized Islam."
Okay. So first, let me get out of the way that African people have historically not been treated well by Muslims. And this is a general thing that I don't think anybody could disagree. Is that something that Islam advocates or Islam teaches? Absolutely not. Because in the Prophet Muhammad's final sermon, he says, paraphrased, a black has no superiority over a white, and a white has no superiority over a black. Rather, it is your deeds that God Almighty will look at. Okay? So the idea of racial inequality is something that is alien to Islam. Okay, have Black people been mistreated by Muslims in the past? Yes, they have, and some Black Muslims or Black people in general continue to be mistreated by Muslims today. With regard to an Africanized version of Islam or the Black Muslim contribution to Islam, Bilal, the first Muslim to give the call to prayer, was a freed slave. One of the foremost scholars in Islam, through whom we receive many of the Islamic traditions, also was a freed slave. The Mamluks were a freed slave empire or kings that became sultan. Tariq bin Ziyad, who landed in the Iberian Peninsula and conquered Spain for the Muslims, was an African Arab. Usman Dan Fodio in Nigeria, the Sokoto Caliphate, okay, Black Muslim scholar. Mansa Musa, said to be the richest man in the history of the earth, I believe. I'm not sure. Maybe Solomon, Prophet Solomon, is more wealthy. Also a Muslim. There are many Black Muslims in the American tradition, where one of the great, I wish I could remember his name, but he was a slave who was an Islamic scholar. And at night, when he would finish his work, he would write out the Quran on a piece of paper by memory. And there exist manuscripts of his handwritten Quran today, and you can go and read it. And he wrote it from memory, and there are no mistakes in his writing of the Quran. So Black Muslims have a massive contribution to the Islamic tradition.
So it's a good segue to one of my points I wanted to bring up. Double standards, right? So I know in the Jewish faith, they have a loophole for sin, which basically says, you know, you can do something to the Goyim and it won't be considered a sin, but if you do it to another Jewish man, then it is a sin. Do any double standards like that exist within the Islamic faith? Do you have special privileges for each other?
Not that I can think of off the top of my head. In a wartime scenario, there are some exceptions that are made, because typically the only time Muslims are supposed to go to war is if there's a war against non-Muslims, right? So in that case, things like deception is permissible as a tactic of war. Things like theft to disrupt the enemy supply line and disrupt enemy economic infrastructure is allowed. Economic sanctions are allowed in a wartime scenario, but these are all wartime dispensations that don't occur in peacetime.
Got it. Perfect. So, as you know, earlier, I asked the question, what's your beef with Islam, right? And we're up to now 318 comments.
Yep.
on that one tweet. All it took was 5 words.
Everybody got beef.
What's that?
I said everybody got beef with Islam.
Everybody got beef with Islam. This one dude says Islam was founded by a 6th century warlord who married a 9-year-old. Is that true?
He wasn't a warlord. He was a nobleman from a tribe in Arabia called the Quraysh tribe. For the vast majority of his messengership, it was prohibited for him to fight, despite the fact that he was being religiously persecuted by his people. I believe it was 13 years after his the start of his prophethood, where he was given the permission to defend himself in the event of an offensive attack by the non-Muslims around him. And shortly after that, he was allowed to go on offense. Okay, so I think, I don't know if you agree or not, or whether your audience agrees or not, but military strategy or military conditions are necessary for a people to be able to exist and to survive and to thrive. Because there's always going to be people who are not content to live and let live. There's always going to be people out there who are going to aggress against you. For a religion to survive and thrive, there has to be some element of protecting itself, of defending itself against foreign aggressors. And I think that this is something that Christianity gets wrong, in the sense that this idea of turn the other cheek. You find that in the West now, Christianity is like a laughing stock. People just, it's made a mockery out of. You have things like Piss Christ. You have things like in House of Cards, Kevin Spacey's character spitting on the statue of Christ the Messiah. You know, this kind of blasphemy, this kind of disrespect towards a prophet of God is something that, you know, Muslims wholly reject and do not tolerate. In fact, I don't know if you remember, there was a movie called Noah a while ago that Russell Crowe was acting in. That movie was actually banned in Muslim countries because it blasphemes or disrespects the prophet Noah. So I think this kind of attitude is necessary in order to protect what's sacred in society. So as far as the claim as being a warlord goes, I reject that claim. The wars that the Muslims fought at that time were necessary in order to protect their fledgling state. As far as marrying a 9-year-old, he did marry one of his wives, Aisha. The marriage contract was completed when she was 6, after which she moved into his abode when she was 9. And I believe ostensibly that when she was at this age, she had already passed puberty. So now in our times, this would be something that's you know, not allowed. It would be considered as something that's you know, a child marriage. But at that time, the culture was entirely different. People matured at a much younger age. People were expected to go into adulthood and take on adult responsibilities at a much younger age. So I think it's an anachronism to consider it as something like a child bride or pedophilia.
Mm. So basically, you're saying back then, if you passed through puberty, that made you a woman.
Yes, and if you passed through puberty, it also made you a man. It's interesting to note that of all the criticisms that enemies of Islam or critics of Islam back in the days would levy at Islam and the Prophet Muhammad, his marriage to Aisha was never one of them. Because back in the day, what was the age of getting married was like 12 and 14 and stuff like that. You know, they would be already married and trying to have kids and stuff like that, right?
Oh, yeah.
So it's really more of a cultural phenomenon. And in fact, if you go around the world, ages of consent vary significantly. In some countries, it's as low as 14. Some countries, I'm not sure if 12 is the number, but 14 is the lowest I can remember. It's 14, it's 16, it's 18, it's whatever. So The main concern is, okay, when it comes to marrying a young woman, okay, there is a floor in terms of age where the marriage contract, that's the lowest it can go, where you can complete a marriage contract, where a father can say, okay, when she's old enough, I'm going to marry her to you. All right. However, that axiom that I mentioned earlier, there is no harm or reciprocating harm. If such a marriage would result in harm to the woman, then by its nature, it's not permissible. All right. So in our times, marrying a young woman like that, a young, whether she's 9 or she's 10 or she's 11 or she's 12, that is something that would be extremely, extremely, I would say, frowned upon, if not impermissible. Despite the fact that it happens in some places in the Muslim world, because these places are not educated. Yeah. So uneducated people do a lot of different things. Yeah. They'll, do female genital mutilation. They'll do acid attacks against women. They'll, marry little girls. Uneducated people do lots of things, and that's not really a reflection on Islam, as it is to a lack of education and a lack of understanding of the rules of the religion.
Indeed, indeed. I want to get a little bit messy here. Imam of peace. Imam of peace. I follow a lot of conservatives. A lot of conservatives follow me, and I see this guy Imam of peace popping up on my timeline, and every time I see him pop up on my timeline, I'm like, what the fuck is this dude talking about, yo? Like, he just seems to me like one of those virtue signaling leftists, except he's Muslim. So I haven't passed judgment. I haven't said anything public about him. That's my first statement about him publicly. Because I wanted to understand Islam first, because maybe there was some validity, but I really got some SJW vibes off of him. What are your thoughts on the Imam of peace? What context, what box do I need to put him in?
Imam of peace, or Imam Tawhidi, is the Sean King of Imams.
He's the Sean King of Imams.
Yes. So he's not actually an Imam. He's from the Shia branch of Islam. Okay, so I'm not sure exactly how good of a Muslim he is, or in terms of his practice of the religion, but for the most part, he has some extremely heretical ideas about the religion, to the extent that like a normal Muslim, a mainstream Muslim, would consider him a heretic. Okay, so that's one thing. Okay, leave that to the side. That's an internal intra-faith criticism. Okay. Second is his credentials as an imam. Okay, in Australia, where he's from, there was an investigation conducted by the Australian news media, I'm not sure which channel it was, into Imam Tawhidi's credentials. And he was found out to be a fraud. All right? So that's another thing. Third thing is that he is not... Go ahead.
My bad, go ahead.
The third thing is that the community in Australia do not recognize his authority. So an imam, or a religious leader, he needs to have some bona fides. Like other imams gotta put some respect on his name. Yeah, and the community needs to recognize him as some sort of authority. His organization, or whatever, his Islamic center, or whatever he calls it, it's like some random office somewhere with like no congregation or nothing. All right. So he's a total fraud. Okay, I believe he left Australia because he was not getting any traction there, in order to go do his grifting in other countries. He went to England, he went to Canada, maybe I think he came to America and did some of the right-wing talk shows as well. And in a lot of cases, a lot of these reformers, Imam Tawhidi, Majid Nawaz, Ayaan Hirsi Ali, invariably they're all frauds, and they've been found out as frauds. It's just that the audience that they're speaking to, which is the right-wing crowd that don't like Muslims and Islam, they are like they're telling them what they want to hear, so they don't want to go too deep into the background and find out, is this person legit or not. So that's what Imam Tawhidi is. He's a fraud. He's the Sean King of Imams.
Yeah. So, all right. So he's a grifter. He tells people what they want to hear, and then they can say, "Oh, look, I don't have a problem with Muslims. I like Imam of peace," right? But they don't even care about his validity. I find that across all races of grifters. People don't care if these people are, frauds or not. They just care that they have somebody championing their beliefs and affirming their biases, which I think is ridiculous. I mean, you've seen Hotep and how far we've come. And, there's a lot of people that try to affirm our biases, but it takes more than that to be Hotep, So what does it take to become an imam? I know you have to be recognized by the other bosses, but, what exactly has to happen there to rise to that, that stature?
Yeah. So imam is quite a broad term. Okay. So imam can be as little as somebody who leads the prayer in the community masjid, the community mosque. Okay, so there could be a full-time imam whose responsibility it is to lead the prayer 5 times a day. That person is called an imam. Okay, that's on the low end of the spectrum. On the high end of the spectrum, the imam is reserved for the paragon of Islamic knowledge, of virtue, virtuosity, of understanding of the religion and spirituality. So it's like the highest level. In fact, we call also the caliph, who's the ruler of the Muslims, we call him the imam, because he's the spiritual and political ruler of the Muslim community. So there's 2 ends of it. If you want to be an imam just to lead the prayer, okay, it's just a matter of like giving in your resume and getting hired. Okay, if you want to be the other imam, the paragon imam, okay, that takes a lifetime of learning, of spiritual sacrifice, of worshiping God, of purifying your soul, of submitting to your creator, and just generally living a life as a good Muslim.
Is there anything in Islamic faith that is against Christianity, or I guess you can say non-religious tolerance?
Well, I mean, we don't believe that they're we believe that they're like disbelievers, because every prophet, the prophet, when a prophet comes to a people, they're obliged to accept him, right? So Jesus, peace be upon him, came to the Jews. The Jews rejected him. All right. Okay. So rejection of Jesus is an act of disbelief. All right. Muhammad, peace be upon him, came to the Jews, the Christians, and all of mankind. They're obliged to accept him. So Christians, in this sense, are required to accept the messengership of Muhammad, and if they don't, they are disbelievers. I mean, as far as tolerance goes, like, it's live and let live, right? We live alongside each other. We don't agree with each other's belief, but we live in peace as much as possible.
Yeah.
That the fact that we disagree religiously, and the fact that we believe in what's called salvific exclusivity, in the sense that we believe that only Muslims are going to heaven, that doesn't negate the fact that we will be civil and peaceful with people who are peaceful to us.
Yeah, I saw somebody in the chat earlier. They said, I thought Hoteps were above this religious conversation, and that person's wholly ignorant, because to be Hotep is to be religious tolerant, to recognize that there are thousands of faiths across the earth, and God didn't put us here to be the judge, jury, and executioner of the world people. So when somebody says they're Muslim or Christian or Jewish, we don't dismiss them or think less of them like some other people will. And I think the huge contradiction I find is that, being the name Hotep Jesus, a lot of conservatives, because they're Christian, have this strong attachment to Jesus, which is fine. But they'll come to me and they'll say, if you don't believe in Jesus Christ, then you're not going to heaven, da, da, da. And I'm like, well, you just said the same thing about Muslims was wrong, but here you are doing it to me, right? So I think every religion has their dogmatism attached to it. And I think it's unfair when people, because the Jews believe one thing, you know, and believe that they are the chosen ones and everybody else is kind of just like cattle, right? So I don't think that that type of dogmatic outlook on other people is exclusive to Islam, you know, and I think it's wholly unfair.
And everybody has their dogma, right? And if you say you don't have your dogma, then I'm going to call you a liar.
Right.
You have your own preferences, and it's okay for you to have your own preferences, you know, as long as we can get along, right?
Oh yeah, I got plenty of dogma. You see it every day on my timeline, right?
That's
Um, especially when it comes to women, right? And I think dogma is good because it protects you, it keeps you insulated, and I think that's what Western civilization has failed in is they release too much of their dogma and have become too liberal and too accepting and too progressive to the point where now it's almost completely destroyed. There pretty much is no culture in America right now. You know, the culture in America is just basically like materialism, buy this, sell that. Like that's our culture. I think that economics is inevitable, but economics should not be a culture. It should be an extension of your culture and how you participate in the economy. Um, how you participate in the economy is definitely a result of how you carry your culture or practice your religion. Because what you buy is an extension of your culture. How
Yep.
you make your purchasing decisions is an extension of culture. So when it comes to economics, what are the overlaps between how Islam decides to operate within economics, commerce, finance? What are the boundaries? Um, how do they interact with other groups that aren't Muslim? Can you give me a bit of education on that?
Yeah, I mean, this is one area where I'm not well versed. I have some general knowledge, so I'll tell you, you know, what I know. So obviously, right off the bat, usury is haram. That is, you know, charging interest. Okay, and now because there's fiat money, there is some discussion to be had about the natural inflation rate of, you know, of money, and the fact that if you don't have some sort of interest to account for inflation, your money devalues over time, right? So that's one discussion. So usury in general, despite the nuanced discussion, usury haram. Okay. The rest of Islamic economics operates according to a free market as much as possible. Okay, um, there there are even lengthy discussions about whether the government has the right to set prices on certain goods, uh, and there is some difference of opinion between the schools of law whether the Islamic government has the right to set prices, to what do you call it, subsidize certain goods and services and things like that. All right. But in general, it's a free market system. Okay. Tax. All right. Taxes. The Islamic State is allowed to tax a land a certain amount based on its yield in terms of agriculture. Right. So there's some kinds of taxes there. All right. There is no personal income tax. There is what's called the zakat, which is the almsgiving of Islam, where a Muslim is obliged to give 2.5% of his savings over a year on year, to the poor. And the collection of zakat is facilitated by the state. So the state is required to employ individuals and have a system to collect the zakat and distribute it to the poor. So I guess, I mean, you could call it a kind of taxation, except for the fact that it's not the government that uses the funds. The government distributes or disburses the funds to deserving individuals. Okay. Other than that, there is a war booty. from the defensive or offensive wars that take place, that are collected in what's called the department of, or the house of wealth, or the house of finances, or whatever you call it. And that again is also distributed in a way where a portion of it is going to infrastructure, a portion of it is going to is dispersed to the warriors, the soldiers. A portion of it is dispersed to trusts and things of that nature. So that's in general how it works. But for the most part, the main takeaway is it's a free market system.
I would trade 2.5% for what we got now here in America in a heartbeat. In a heartbeat, bro. This shit is ridiculous.
How much tax you paying right now?
What's that?
How much are you paying?
Damn near half, dog.
Oh my goodness.
Damn near half, yo. Almost half my shit goes to this shitty ass government. So I'm gonna have to get a more expensive accountant to figure out how to find some loopholes in this system. Next year, I'm setting up a 501c and to turn that and get some of this income off of my personal books. So I'll pay less. But yeah, it's fucking ridiculous. I want to ask you, Western civilization, there's many vices that we love to spend on: entertainment, drugs, sex, alcohol. In the Islamic community, what are the vices? What do people like to spend their money on? Is it entertainment as well, or what do people spend their money on?
Well, I mean, they spend it on food a lot. Muslims are generally, I guess, there's quite a few Muslims who are obese and overweight. They spend it on things like coffee. They'll spend it on other forms of entertainment, like music, movies, and things like that. So I mean, they're Muslims. I mean, Muslims are just like any other people, right? We're as much affected by the globalism, the culture of globalism and consumerism that's spread across the world. Like the right wing complains about demographic change, but the cultural change that globalism brings across the world is far more pervasive, in the sense that it, more than demographics, it kills the culture of a people. There's a McDonald's, there's a Starbucks in Mecca, like right outside God's house, So
Haram.
Money talks, right? This is these people's God is money, right? So I think that kind of pervasive spread of the culture of consumption, that globalist spread of culture and consumption, is more of a negative effect, or as much of a negative effect as demographic change.
So you guys aren't insulated from the consumerism?
No, absolutely not. That's one of the reasons why I focus a lot in my my sort of the Muslim side of my online activity. I focus it a lot on America and Canada and UK, what the West is doing, more specifically America, because America is the exporter of culture to the world. And American culture, by and large,
anti-culture.
Yeah, I mean, it's degenerate, is what I was going to say.
Yeah.
By and large, it's degeneracy. So that's why I focus a lot of my efforts on becoming the Alpha Muslim, which is my blog for Muslim men. I focus a lot of my efforts on what's going on with Muslims in America. Because it's not just the American culture, the American non-Muslim culture that gets exported. It's also the American Muslim culture that gets exported. And American Muslims are a product of American culture, which is degenerate.
Yeah.
So, like, American Muslims, their understanding, their way of interacting with the world, the way they interact with the environment around them and the people around them, is not necessarily what's best for the rest of the world. But because of YouTube, because of the internet, because of what's available online, because most Muslims interact with their religion and their religious material in English, the American Muslim understanding is what's exported to the rest of the world. So my efforts are sort of a counterbalance against that, because I know that Muslim countries are just maybe 5 or 10 years behind what's going on in America. So we're just 10 years behind the whole unisex, gender fluid bathrooms and the pronouns debate. You know, like we
You think
already have feminism, yeah. We already have like gay rights starting to come up, yeah. But so now it's like just 5 or 10 years before we're starting to have like furries and pronoun discussions and unisex bathrooms.
damn. So that means we're not gonna know who's underneath that burqa. It could be a man or a woman, depending on how they identify.
Like, you know, Tyrone or somebody. You know that Eric Badu song is like Tyrone, but it's called.
Yo, this crazy, man. When I think about Islam, I just think about the Nation of Islam. And we get a lot of pushback. We get a lot of pushback from Black Christians. We get a lot of pushback from white people because of Nation of Islam's history. Some of the words that were spat by some of their leaders, like Khalid Muhammad and Farrakhan. Any thoughts on the Nation of Islam, or any background you can give us? Because I know it's quite different from the other Muslim faiths, right?
Yeah. So the original Nation of Islam, the creed of the original Nation of Islam is not Islam.
Okay.
They're not Muslims. Those beliefs that they have wouldn't make them Muslim. More recently, I believe it's the son or the grandson that has moved them away from those original teachings to what can be considered an Islamic creed.
Now, why are they not Islamic creeds?
Because I mean, you can correct me if I'm saying something incorrect here, but his name is Warith Deen Muhammad is the founder.
I thought it was Elijah Muhammad, but
Elijah Muhammad. Pardon me. Warith Deen Muhammad, I think, is his son or his grandson.
that's his
So
son.
Elijah Muhammad claimed that he is a prophet of God.
Right.
Right. Muslims believe that Muhammad is the last and final prophet and messenger of Allah. Any person or individual who claims that they are a prophet after Muhammad is a false prophet. Yeah, a false messiah. So any people who believe that claim, by definition, they can't be Muslim.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And also, if you think about the Nation of Islam, there are other beliefs about about culture and race, about white people. These are completely antithetical to Islamic beliefs. In fact, there is a ongoing debate right now about the racism that brown Muslims feel towards white Muslims. And there's a lot of anti-white sentiment among the brown Muslims. And I believe that is one of the effects of the relationship that Muslims in the West have with the left and the SJWs. So the Nation of Islam's beliefs towards white people are, completely antithetical to Islam, which is a side, like a byproduct of their incorrect beliefs that, don't make them Muslim in the first place. The modern Nation of Islam is closer to, they're closer to Sunni Islam.
Gotcha. Yeah. I don't know. I look at actions and change, and there's a lot of people who got their life cleaned up by the Nation of Islam.
No doubt.
A lot of brothers go into
no doubt about that. And in fact, the Nation of Islam did a lot of positive in the American community, not just the Black community. In fact, what I say is that American Muslim leadership should be handed over to the Black Muslims in America, because the Black Muslims in America are more familiar, or they are more a part of the American culture, of the American, the lattice of sociocultural phenomenon in America than the immigrant Muslims that are leading the nation, leading the Muslim community in America today. Because most of these American Muslim leaders are first generation, second generation, third generation immigrants. They're not Americans.
right.
Yeah.
So they wouldn't understand.
Yeah, just like Kamala Harris is not African American. She's a Jamaican Indian. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So they wouldn't understand the nuances of the
Exactly.
culture that can't even
Exactly.
explain. They have to be experienced.
Exactly. And then if you think about the history of black Americans in, you know, in America, they have that, like, that shared transmitted cultural DNA through the generations, okay, that makes them uniquely positioned to navigate the problems that Muslims in America are facing. You know, because like Islam and black people are like this in America, you know, and
Yeah.
they're the ones who are, you know, most closely placed to, you know, to handle the situation that's happening, or the situations that occur, you know, with Muslims in America.
Hmm. In Philly, you see a lot of Sunni Muslims, a lot of Sunni black Muslims. Like in the hip hop community, got Freeway, you
Yeah,
know, who's a practicing Sunni Muslim. Loon, uh, who used to be signing the Bad Boy, is a Sunni Muslim as well. And I
I
got it.
remember.
What's that?
I remember Loon.
You remember Loon, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
he was like the next version of Mace, right?
Yeah. Yeah. He's supposed to take.
Bass became a preacher. I was like, yo, Puffy was like, yo, I gotta get another Mace, son. Let me get this guy over here. Yeah, and then he became Muslim. And then what's the other guy? Lupe Fiasco, Muslim.
Is he Muslim?
I believe he is Muslim. Most Def, Muslim.
Right. I know most Def
Dave,
is definitely.
Dave Chappelle, Muslim.
Dave Chappelle's Muslim?
Yeah, he's Muslim.
Oh wow.
Yeah, he
But he
doesn't
drinks
talk
alcohol.
about it. He doesn't talk about it openly because he recognizes that he's not a very good Muslim. Uh,
Right.
so he doesn't want his personality and his shortcomings to reflect badly on, you know, on Islam and the Muslim faith, which
Yeah.
I applaud him for. You know, it's a lot better than you know, some of these people who are openly claiming to be Muslim but they're, you know, degenerates.
Yeah. 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 Because you know Dave smokes and he drinks alcohol. So yeah, he definitely isn't the prime example for a Muslim.
Yeah.
um, I hear this thing called Muslim. Moslem. There's difference between that and Muslim.
No, there isn't. It's just a um, like an Americanized pronunciation of the word. It's like they say jihad, but actually it's supposed to be pronounced jihad. Yeah. So it's just the way Americans pronounce things. So when they say Muslim, they're supposed to be saying Muslim. It's just that,
Right.
yeah. And so
So
like you hear them sometimes they'll say Saudi Arabia, yeah,
mm,
or Qatar, when in fact it's Saudi Arabia and Qatar.
yeah. So I hear this word jihad a lot. What is
Yeah.
this? Is this a radical group of people that are terrorists?
No, it's what we call struggle. The literal translation is a struggle. Okay,
Okay. Jihad means struggle.
it means struggle, and in a general usage, it refers to war. Okay, and this war can be defensive or offensive,
Okay.
and it most closely follows what you in America will call just war theory.
Okay.
Yeah, are you familiar with just war theory?
I've read a little bit about it in some other books, but it's basically justification for war.
Yeah, exactly. So it's you know, it's the idea that um, there are only certain reasons for which you're allowed to use a Muslim army, and that those reasons should only be to, one, defend the Muslims from aggression, or preemptive offense if you are expecting aggression from an enemy. So those are the only two you know, situations where it's allowed.
Right. Right. Um, I want to get messy again.
Yeah.
Ilhan Omar, she cute to me. I think she's sexy, man. I'm trying to still meet that hijab. But the conservatives hate her, and I understand why. Um, and Uncle Hotep thinks that she's an agent. He thinks she's a Zionist agent. What's your take on Ilhan Omar? Is she trustworthy? Is she on the up and up? Is she what is up with her?
Um, man, first of all, let me say that it's actually impermissible for me to speak badly of another Muslim. Is considered backbiting, right? Since she's a public figure and since she's in the public forum, um, like people tend to have this idea of Muslims that we're all very religious and we all follow the religion 100% to the T. And I guess that's a good thing. That's like the perception that Muslims are religiously observant, and that's a good thing. But the fact is, Muslims are as flawed as any other individual. Okay, despite the fact that we may have Muslim names, despite the fact that we may dress like Muslims, that we might talk like Muslims, that we have mostly Muslim belief or Islamic beliefs, we're all going to have some shortcomings. We're all going to have some beliefs or ideas that aren't in line with what would be considered as proper Islamic or Muslim belief or behavior. Okay, even in my case, there are many things that I do and say and think that may not be considered, at least by more practicing Muslims, as things that Muslims should do, say, or think. Yeah, and in fact, it's gotten me like all canceled pretty much uh, by the online Muslim community. We call them Muslim Twitter.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think Ilhan Omar needs to be looked at from that angle. So
wait, why did Muslim Twitter cancel you?
Because I'm too like I'm too Hotep.
Too centered in your thinking.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like a side discussion. It's really not relevant,
Right.
I have my support, and most of my support comes from people who are actually religious scholars who
Okay.
actually know the religion. So, like, as long as I'm cool with them, I feel like okay, I can keep doing what I'm doing. Is when they start disavowing me, I gotta be like, yo, what did I maybe I done something wrong.
Yeah.
So like, okay, so when you think about Islam Omar, you got to look at her, Ilhan Omar. You got to look at her from that perspective. Okay, here's a person, from Somalia, from Africa, and we know that people from the Middle East, Asia, South Asia, Africa, those regions uh, tend to be more inclined to corruption than your average Western person. Yeah. So some of those behaviors could be looked at in that light. Okay, could be just corrupt people doing corrupt things, and not some sort of Zionist plot to destabilize America. Her own personal failings as a as a woman or a Muslim. Again, everybody's got their faults. Everybody's got their mistakes.
So she has a beef against a certain group of people. Is she justified in that beef?
Which group of people?
Against a certain group which shall not be named, but
Yeah. Look, I mean, the situation in America where this group of people is beloved, and is a sacred cow and cannot be criticized is almost unique to America.
okay. The only place this is happening.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can also say in Western Europe is also a situation where you can't criticize these people. The factor of the matter is, around the rest of the world, it's okay to criticize this group of people for what are perceived, injustices committed towards other groups of people, and general injustices committed towards people in the world, right? So you have to look at it from that perspective. Yeah, this is a person coming again from Somalia, okay, where criticizing these people is like it's an everyday thing, you know. Um, virtually mosques in the region, okay, North Africa, Middle East, South Asia, on during the Friday prayer, okay, when the Imam prays, supplicates, and the congregation supplicates with him. One of the supplications, one of the prayer is that God Almighty free Palestine. Okay, this is happening around the world, so you have to understand it in that context as well. Okay, so in that sense, the beef that she has is generally understandable. She's just somebody who's who has the social justice points to be able to vocalize that criticism.
Yeah.
And even her, it's not enough, despite being black, despite being Muslim, despite being a woman. So it's got like 3 levels of social justice points, but even that is not enough to overcome the wrath of the elves.
Indeed, indeed. Um, so I guess over there it's basically normal to criticize that group, just as over here it's normal to criticize a Democrat or Republican, right?
Yeah,
It's just
yeah,
normalized. Whereas
exactly.
over here it's like
Exactly. It's like it's normalized to criticize Russia or China.
right.
Yeah, there's not going to be any problem. Like you said, it's like Russian interference, like Putin this, Putin that. Uh,
Hmm.
it's totally that's the same. It's the same thing, with this group of people or this country.
Word, word. Um, Black Mountain Hotel wants to know what's his opinion on the Moorish Science Temple. You know anything about the Moorish Science Temple?
I know nothing about this, so I have no opinion about it.
Yeah, you might want to take a look at it. This was started in 1913 by Noble Drew Ali. He has this document called the Circle 7 Quran.
Yeah.
Yeah. You might want to check that out. Right around that time is the time where a lot of you got Harvey Spencer Lewis comes to America, props up the Rosicrucian organization.
Hmm.
A lot of religious group or religious leaders started coming here and seeing
Hmm.
that this is a land of opportunity to push a gnosis, and Noble Drew Ali is one of those guys. So maybe you want to check him out, and you can give me some feedback on Noble Drew Ali. But that's you'll even see you'll see the crescent moon with the Circle 7 Quran, and
Yeah.
there's some overlap with Islam with that, of course. So yeah, I think in your free time, check that out.
I will check it out. I mean, there are a lot of one could call them Islamic offshoots, like the 5%ers. Arm, leg, arm, head. They take some concept from Islam and then um, uh, they adapt it for their own uses, right? There are those. I don't know if you have them in New York or New Jersey. The red hats.
Yeah,
The
that's the Moorish community. Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Is that them?
yeah,
They wear the red turban with
yeah,
like.
like Abu from Aladdin.
Yeah. Okay. So it's those guys. Yeah. We had them in Chicago as well. I remember one time I had to go into a hood uh, for like a. I thought I was going to I don't know what I was going for, but it ended up being some sort of MLM opportunity. So these guys, they took me to the hood for some MLM opportunity, and there were some of these Moorish guys there. They had the red hats on.
Yeah,
I remember that.
yeah, yeah. The Moors push heavy out here in the community. Uh, I would say they're we have in the Hotep community, Hotep can often be used as a pejorative or an umbrella term for some of these subgroups like the Moors, the 5%ers, the Nuwapians, Nation of Islam. So they're in some ways a subset of the quote unquote Hotep community. Although if you said that to them, they'd be like, hell no, we not Hotep. We
Yeah,
are our
Hotep is like Assalamu alaikum.
yeah.
Yeah,
How
because
so?
Hotep is like a greeting of peace, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a dozen definitions. One of them has to be at rest. One of them is satisfaction. One of them means a tomb. Um, uh, you know, transitioning into the afterlife. There's many different definitions of the word Hotep and Hetep and Hetep. So you can, check out Shaka Akmos. That's one of my teachers. And he's the one that taught me the meaning and symbol of Hotep. But people do use it as a greeting, right? And to mean, peace or peace out, what's up. So yeah, very similar to when somebody says Assalamu alaikum. What's the literal translation of Assalamu alaikum again? To peace be
Yeah,
unto you?
it means peace be upon you. Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. So in the black community, we've like Aki. Aki is what? That's
It means brother.
in Hebrew though, right?
It means brother in Arabic, Akhi. So sometimes the Philly people will say ak.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Even in Chicago we say ak.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Aki is actually Arabic?
Yeah, there must be some sort of a connection, also a similar word in Hebrew as well.
Yeah.
Semitic languages, they're the same.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was gonna say. Yeah, the Semitic languages are very, very similar. And I think that's some of the power too, right? When we think about language, and language is a result of the vibration of our vocal cords and the vibration that we put out into this atmosphere. That's the advantage that Jews and Muslims have over the rest of us. You guys are operating off of ancient languages. We're operating off of bastard languages like English, French, German. Like English is a combination of like 4 or 5 different languages.
Yeah.
It's actually derived from German. We don't speak Latin, so I think when you're able to also because I don't want to go into the mystical, that's a little bit too deep for some, the mystical nuances or result of using these ancient languages. But I think, you guys are able to communicate much better than the rest of us are because you have these languages. Like some words don't even exist in your language that exist in the human language, right? Because our civilization is so screwed up. We got to name some of this extra dumb shit. Whereas you guys have some very holy terms that don't exist in the English language. And when we look at like Orwell talks about how the English language has been flooded with a whole bunch of negative words, whereas you can't find too many happy words. So I do this experiment with kids all the time. I say, give me a negative word. And they'll go on for minutes, 10 minutes straight with negative words. Then I'll say, give me words that are happy words or positive words. And they can't go but 30 seconds, dog.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think
try that with my kids.
Yeah, try it and see what happens. But this is something I think you guys have an advantage over, culturally, because language is an extension of the culture. Is there anything that we're missing? Any myth about Islam that we didn't dispel today? Is there anything that we need to know about Islam today before we part? Is there anything that you want people to go home with as far as an understanding or even a feeling about that?
That's a good one. And I was going to stall because I couldn't think of something, but I did think of something.
Okay.
So we have this a common, I would call it propaganda. Ostensibly pushed by the Muslims themselves that Islam is peace. Islam doesn't actually mean peace. Islam means submission. And the peace comes through submission. When the soul submits itself to its creator willingly, through this act of submission, it achieves peace. And the word Muslim is actually the active participle of the word Islam. So a Muslim is somebody who is engaging in the act of submission continually to his creator, his or her creator. That's what I wanted to share with you.
Awesome. Before we close out, I want to give you this opportunity, right? We're gonna play a game. This is a game exclusive to Nabeel. I haven't done this with anybody else because of who you are. So what I want to do is I want to give you an opportunity to do your 60-second pitch on your marketing services, right? And then we'll run through a scenario where you're selling me a product and I'm going to play a hard ass. And just to like show people how a sales conversation should go when you're selling your services. So I
Okay.
get you start off with your 60-second pitch, and then I'll start throwing out rebuttals, and then we just kind of work through it and make this a learning experience for people. How you're supposed to handle rebuttals and sales.
All right. Well, okay. So I am the co-owner and founder of Dropkick Copy. We are an email marketing and content marketing agency in Dubai, and we provide services to B2B businesses to help them make more sales through their existing assets, their email list, their online audiences, and so on.
Awesome. I think email is kind of archaic. I don't think my business really wants to use email marketing. Do you think I should push email marketing? Why?
Well, it really depends on what your goals are. If, for example, your only goal is to get impressions online on social media, then email is not something that you would want to go after. But if your intent is to actually build a list of customers, then out of all of the marketing channels available to you, email is the strongest one. Every dollar spent on email gives you $40 back.
We've been doing email over here. We're selling shaving cream. We're kind of like the Dollar Shave Cup for shaving cream. And email hasn't been working out for us. So I don't think I want to try it out. I don't think I need your services. I just don't know if I really believe in email. It seems maybe I should just run some Facebook ads. I mean, we have 10,000 people, active customers in our email database, and we just haven't seen any sales from it. I don't think I need your service.
Well, I would question that actually. If you have 10,000 customers on your email list, those are people who have already bought from you. They're much easier to get them to buy again than it is to actually acquire a brand new customer on the front end by spending Facebook ads, spending money on Facebook ads. The cost of acquiring a customer on using Facebook ads is significantly more expensive than the resources that you will expend in sending emails to your 10,000 existing customers. So your cost of acquisition for those subsequent sales continues to go down the more you sell them. And as long as you keep adding fresh customers to that list, email is going to continue to be profitable for you.
Now, I've been working with a whole bunch of marketing agencies in the past, and I've been burnt so many times. They promised me a high ROI. They said they're going to get me more sales. I hire them. I spend $20,000 on a campaign, and we get squat. And what makes me believe that you can get this done that they can't?
I will obviously we have case studies and testimonials of doing this for our clients successfully. Obviously, I mean that doesn't mean that we'll be able to do it successfully for you. So usually what we tend to do is we send out a simple campaign, very simple campaign that's meant to be a cash injection campaign, generate some quick cash for your business, and that is actually what's going to help you pay for our services. And it's also going to demonstrate that we have the ability to make you sales uh, using your email list for your business. Another thing that we do offer, if your business model and product is attractive enough, is that we would go in for a revenue share deal. So that way we share in the risk with you. And it's not just you putting up all the money and expecting results from us.
So, how much money is this thing going to cost me I guess, hire you? Do we have our guy handle the email marketing and you just tell us what to do? Are you going to handle it? Do we fire our email guy? And how much does all this cost?
Well, our system is actually fully done for you. So if you want us to take care of everything from writing the copy, from planning the launches, from planning the email editorial calendar to actually implementing the emails, we can do that for you. Yeah. Our service starts at $10,000 a month. However, we expect that within the first few weeks you'll be able to make your money back at least, and then some.
There it is, folks. Nabeel Azeez from Dropkick Copy. If you guys, I know, like you said, you said that you get a lot of pushback from regular people, right? But the religious leaders, they're like cool with you, right? And they kind of like validate you. And I find that to be the same with myself, where like the hoi polloi, they were like, yo, this dude is crazy. But all my
Normal.
peers in high positions be like, yo, Hotep Jesus, you dope, bro. Right?
Yeah, I mean, it's the normies, right? It's like maybe I don't know if you've noticed this as well. So I recently took an IQ test, right? And I found out I'm high IQ, and I'm like, oh, now this should make sense, because all these people are just a little low IQ. It's like, most of the, I mean, not to insult my brothers and sisters, but a lot of brown people are some level of inbred, and over time that tends to degrade their ability to reason and rationalize properly. That could be one aspect of it. Another aspect is that social media has generally turned people's brains to mush. Reading comprehension is like at an all-time low, and there's no concept of nuance anymore. Like, people don't understand metaphor, people don't understand hyperbole. Everything is taken hyper literally.
Yeah.
That is a significant barrier to communication with normies, because high IQ people tend to be pithy.
Yes.
They say a lot without using a lot of words.
Right.
And it requires some level of cognitive flexibility to be able to read in between the words to understand exactly what is being said.
Yes.
And I suppose maybe that's our fault for not speaking in a way that everybody will understand us. But the thing about Twitter is a medium where brevity is favored, and the more concise you're able to be, the more pithy you are, the stronger your writing is on Twitter. That's obviously changed a little bit now, since the character limit increased to 280 characters. But when it was 140, there was a big difference between the type of content that got put out, and especially the quality content. And it's amazing to see some people who are skilled at expressing their ideas in so few words. It's almost like an art form.
Yeah, absolutely. Like yesterday, I said ban porn, right? And the first thing people said was, I don't want the government to do anything. And it's like, dude, nobody even mentioned the word government. You put that there because that's how your mind works. You know what I mean? And so I pick and choose where and when I want to be specific and when I want to be pithy. Most of the time, I'm very pithy.
Yeah.
But because I just don't feel like I should have to explain myself, like if you don't get it, you're just a moron. And my message really isn't for morons. Like, I'm trying to attract a crowd of high IQ people. So I speak to high IQ people. And if you're just so stupid, you don't get it, you get offended. Hey, that's not my problem, right? But then there's sometimes where there's a certain message where I'm like, nah, the NPCs really have to hear this. So I'll be very specific in my detail, da 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 da. Yesterday somebody said, can you first, he passed judgment upon me. Then I had another tweet where I said, it's funny that I can look into somebody's mind based upon their reaction to me based upon a very vague thing. Then he comes back later and asks for clarity. I'm like, no, you missed that opportunity. Right? So I'm very lazy when it comes to things like that. But how much of a role do you think learning copywriting can help somebody with social media? Because that's what I study.
Yeah, I mean, and I think just to touch on the point that you just made, there's another problem where in debate it's called the principle of charity, where you always try to take the most charitable understanding of what your opponent is saying.
Mm.
So, attention spans and the nature of social media being what it is, for some reason, people tend to always take the most negative possible interpretation of what you're saying.
Yes.
So when you say something that's ambiguous and it could be interpreted in two ways, they always go to the negative.
Right.
Whereas the intelligent person is going to try to understand, did he mean it this way, or is there some sort of charitable interpretation that I can give it, so that I give him the benefit of the doubt, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So onto the subject of copywriting. So, when we're writing copy, we're actually trying not to be pithy. I'm going deliberately out of my way to use a few more words if I can dumb down the language a little bit. I may use 3 one-syllable words or a 2-syllable word, a few 2-syllable words, rather than a 4-syllable word. Why? Because I'm not trying to display my skill and my vocabulary and my writing flourishes. I'm trying to make a sale. In the context of social media, if you're in the realm or the industry or the niche of changing culture, as you are, Hotep Jesus, then your writing needs to be able to convey your ideas in a way that propagates these ideas and the ideas enter the consciousness of your audience, right? So in that case, you may need to write at the level of your audience. So typically, copywriters, we say that don't write above a fifth grade level. Yeah. And a lot of copywriters, my writing when I'm trying to sell stuff is at like a third grade level. Some people can get down to like a first grade level. Um, so it's the objective behind what you're writing for. And really, I mean, it's really not a sign of high intelligence that you always use highfalutin language. It's a sign of more a sign of arrogance, and a more a sign of inability to convey your idea in a simple way that anybody can understand. So while yes, being pithy is something that's uh, praiseworthy and interesting and valuable, okay, just something that both of us appreciate. Um, the ability to convey ideas in a way that everybody can understand, and your ideas are not being misunderstood, is actually something very valuable. Even if you look at the text of the Quran is not in the most complicated Arabic that exists. The Quran as a book was revealed for all peoples in all times, so that everybody can understand, even the like Bedouin Arab from the desert. So that's how ideas spread, is by mass consumption, mass adoption. So that's really what copywriting is about. It's about uh, creating messaging to communicate ideas in a way that is sticky. And you're a master of this, obviously, not to be on your dick or anything, but you're quite proficient at this.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, I hate that in the black community where you compliment another man and it's classified as on your dick. You know what I'm saying?
No homo. Pause.
Yeah, no word. I mean, I think there is a time where people are on your dick and it's like a little too like, almost homo-ish. It's just like, damn, like you got ride this man's jock that hard. Like, are you a man? What do you do with your life? So I do see some of that, but I think sometimes that word gets thrown around too much just because you compliment another dude. But great conversation today. Um, we got a chance to cover Islam and marketing a little bit at the end there. So yeah, I appreciate you, man. I'm gonna see you on Twitter. Tell the people where they can find you.
Yeah, first of all, let me say thank you so much, Brian Hotep Jesus. It's my pleasure. Obviously, we've known each other quite a while, and we've always had positive interactions, and I really appreciate what you have done for the online world in general, and obviously you contributed a lot to culture and the community. Obviously, your goal is mainly to help Black people, but you've also helped the Muslim community in ways that you don't know because of your tireless efforts in clarifying the issues that Black people face, in the West, in your communities. People can find me at Twitter. My handle is at Nabeel Azeez DXB. NABEEL AZEEZ I'll just give them one call to action.
That's another lesson there for y'all. One call to action at a time. That's also the rule in propaganda too.
Exactly.
Thanks, man. Yeah, hopefully we'll be able to do this again sometime soon, bro.
For sure. Thank you, sir.
Peace out, y'all.